Welcome in, because this Washington quarter might look like everyday change, but hidden inside this coin is a rare mistake that collectors have quietly paid serious money for, and most people never even notice it sitting in their own pocket. Before you move on, you'll want to see why some versions of this coin have turned ordinary finds into unexpected five, six, even six-figure surprises. First coin. 1776-1976 Washington Bicentennial Quarter, minted in Denver, sits in the hand like a quiet piece of American history that never expected to become a modern-day treasure story. Yet here it is, the familiar Washington portrait on the obverse paired with that bold dual date, 1776-1976, and on the reverse, the iconic colonial drummer Boy frozen in motion, as if still echoing the sound of a revolution that shaped a nation. With the small D mint mark quietly stamped to the right, often overlooked, but critically important to collectors who know that Denver's production carries its own subtle variations and hidden surprises that can turn an ordinary pocket find into something worth remembering forever. To understand why this coin carries such emotional weight, you have to go back to 1976, when the United States Mint produced it in massive numbers to celebrate 200 years of independence. Flooding circulation with commemorative energy meant, for every pocket, every store register, every everyday exchange, so that millions of Americans would unknowingly hold a piece of the bicentennial celebration in their hands. Never imagining that decades later people would be searching couch cushions, old jars, and inherited collections, hoping to uncover a version that survived the passage of time in extraordinary condition, or with minting quirks that slipped through quality control during a historic rush of production. Look closer and the details start to matter in ways most people never notice at first glance. The copper-nickel-clad composition weighing around 5.67 grams, the sharp reeded edge meant to discourage counterfeiting, the slight tonal shift between worn circulation pieces and untouched mint-state examples, and the way light reflects differently off Denver strikes depending on pressure and die wear, sometimes revealing faint inconsistencies in the lettering or subtle weakness in the drummer's drum lines that hint at variations in striking force, all of which become critical markers when a collector begins separating ordinary change from potential high-grade discoveries. Then come the anomalies that ignite real excitement in the collecting world. Doubled die obverse showing faint but noticeable doubling in Liberty, or the date, off-center strikes where the design drifts unnaturally across the planchet, clipped planchets that remove a crescent of metal from the rim, missing or weak-clad layers that expose a copper core tone, strike-through errors where foreign material interrupts the minting process, and even rare misaligned dies that shift the visual balance of Washington's profile. Each flaw transforming what was meant to be a standard commemorative coin into a one-of-a-kind accident that collectors actively hunt, because imperfection is often where value begins. As grading standards tighten, the difference between a common circulated example and a certified high-grade piece becomes dramatic, with professional services evaluating luster, strike sharpness, surface preservation, and eye appeal under magnification, and coins that reach MS65 and above entering a different category entirely, where registry collectors compete for perfection, while Denver minted bicentennial quarters with exceptional eye appeal, minimal bag marks, and strong strikes can suddenly attract serious attention, especially when combined with verified mint errors that elevate their status beyond typical commemorative circulation pieces. In the lower range of collectible excitement, minor varieties or lightly unusual strikes can realistically reach between $2,500 and $7,500, depending on demand and condition, while more noticeable anomalies or stronger eye appeal pieces may approach around $9,000, and high-grade certified examples with exceptional preservation can conceptually reach near $10,000 in competitive collector environments, with rare collector-preferred pieces sometimes discussed around $12,000 and exceptionally preserved or unusual strike characteristics pushing toward $15,000, always depending on authentication, market timing, and buyer interest rather than any fixed or guaranteed outcome. When the story escalates into true rarity territory, Unusual mint anomalies or dramatic error combinations can theoretically push perceived value into much higher speculative ranges, with $25,000 tied to significant minting mistakes, and even more extraordinary finds occasionally discussed in collector circles reaching $65,000 or up to $80,000 for coins with exceptional historical curiosity, pristine condition. And verified rarity factors, often compared emotionally to a sudden down payment on a home or a life-changing windfall discovered not in a vault, but in something as ordinary as a forgotten coin roll or an old family collection. And that is why the real lesson never comes from chasing numbers alone, but from learning how to examine what you already have, checking weight consistency, studying color shifts in the clad layer, inspecting rim shape for irregularities, rotating the coin under light to catch doubling in the lettering, and paying attention to strike alignment that feels slightly off-center, because every small detail tells a story the minting press did not intend to preserve. And somewhere among millions of ordinary bicentennial quarters, a few anomalies still hide in plain sight, waiting for the moment someone slows down long enough to notice them. Just before the next coin in this series reveals an even more shocking discovery that most people would walk right past without ever knowing what they missed. Next coin. USA 1965 Washington quarter coin enters the scene like something you've seen 1,000 times before. Just another silver-toned piece of change that might roll across a counter or disappear into a pocket without a second thought. Yet under certain light, it carries an unsettling depth, almost like it remembers a turning point in American coinage history that most people never notice. The face of Washington looks familiar, steady, almost routine, but the year 1965 changes everything for collectors who understand that this wasn't just another strike. It was a moment when the US Mint quietly shifted the rules of what a quarter was made of, and that shift created cracks in consistency that still echo through the hobby today. In 1965, the Mint was in chaos in its own controlled way, responding to the rising silver shortage that forced a dramatic transition away from 90% silver coinage into copper-nickel-clad composition. And during this changeover, the Washington quarter became one of the most closely watched designs in production, struck without mint marks across the board as part of a temporary policy meant to discourage hoarding and stabilize circulation, which now adds another layer of mystery for collectors trying to trace origin stories that were intentionally blurred at the time. What was meant to be an invisible transition has instead become one of the most fascinating error-hunting eras in modern US numismatics. At first glance, the coin feels ordinary. Its surface carries a muted silver-gray tone that can fool the eye into assuming it is just another worn piece from circulation. But closer inspection reveals subtle differences in luster, faint variations in strike sharpness, and rim characteristics that sometimes feel slightly heavier or uneven depending on how the planchet was prepared during the early clad experiments. With Washington's profile appearing either sharply defined or slightly softened depending on die pressure and production timing. Even the edge, reeded yet inconsistent on certain strikes, becomes a silent clue that something more complex happened during its creation. Then the story deepens with minting anomalies that turn this already transitional coin into a collector's obsession. Rare 1965 silver planchet errors where leftover 90% silver blanks from earlier production accidentally entered the system, producing quarters that don't match expected weight or coloration, alongside double die obverse varieties that reveal subtle duplication in Liberty or the date, off-center strikes that push Washington's image into dramatic misalignment. Clipped planchets, broad strikes that erase the defined rim, struck through errors that interrupt the design with foreign material impressions, and missing or incomplete clad layer errors that expose unexpected copper tones beneath the surface. As grading professionals examine these coins under magnification, what matters is no longer just age or appearance, but preservation of original mint intent, luster that hasn't been broken by circulation, strike alignment that remains true to center, surfaces free of heavy contact marks, and microscopic details in lettering and relief that determine whether a coin enters the realm of registry-worthy examples or remains an overlooked pocket piece, with certified MS-65 and higher examples becoming focal points for serious collectors who compete for condition as fiercely as rarity itself. In documented collector markets, 1965 Washington quarters with notable but moderate errors or strong eye appeal have been recorded in the $5,000 to $12,000 range, while more advanced minting mistakes or higher-grade certified anomalies can reach around $20,000. And rare error examples with compelling visual defects or transitional features have achieved approximately $35,000 in select auction environments where demand intensifies around unique minting history rather than simple scarcity. As the rarity escalates further, strong mint-state coins with exceptional preservation and eye appeal have been discussed around $50,000 in competitive private sales. Unusual and dramatic minting mistakes, especially those involving multiple error types, can push towards $75,000, and extreme error combinations or historically significant transitional pieces have reached near $100,000 in rare documented cases. While the most extraordinary one-of-a-kind discoveries tied to exceptional provenance, perfect preservation, and dramatic mint anomalies have been associated with figures approaching $120,000, always dependent on verification, auction dynamics, and collector competition rather than fixed value expectations. And through all of this, the real tension comes from what might still be sitting unnoticed in ordinary places, because the difference between a common quarter and a life-changing discovery often comes down to careful observation, checking exact weight against standard clad expectations, studying metal color shifts that hint at silver content, rotating the coin to see if strike alignment feels off-center, examining the rim for unusual expansion or weakness, and using focused light to detect subtle letter doubling, always followed by professional authentication instead of impulsive assumptions, because the next moment of discovery rarely announces itself loudly, and somewhere in that silence, another 1965 quarter waits for someone patient enough to recognize that history sometimes hides inside the most familiar objects, just before the trail leads into something even more unexpected. Next up, 1968 United States quarter dollar appears at first like a completely unremarkable piece of everyday currency, the kind that blends into pocket change so easily that most people never give it a second glance. Yet this coin carries the quiet weight of a post-transition era in U.S. minting, when production systems had already adapted to clad composition, but were still refining consistency. And that in-between stage is exactly where some of the most intriguing variations begin to surface. Washington's profile is steady and familiar, almost calming, but under the surface, it represents a production year where subtle inconsistencies in striking pressure, die preparation, and metal bonding occasionally created outcomes that were never meant to survive in circulation, yet somehow did. By 1968, the United States Mint had fully settled into the copper-nickel clad system introduced just a few years earlier, and unlike transitional years, this period was supposed to represent stability, uniformity, and control. But in reality, high-volume production at multiple facilities introduced small imperfections that only became visible decades later, when collectors began scrutinizing coins under magnification instead of passing them across counters. The no-mint mark confusion of earlier years had ended, but Denver and Philadelphia strikes from this era still show subtle identity differences that experienced collectors can recognize in the way the fields reflect light and how sharply the eagle's feathers appear on the reverse. Visually, the 1968 quarter carries a slightly more refined texture compared to earlier clad issues, with a cool metallic sheen that can shift from bright silver gray to a deeper muted tone depending on wear and preservation, while Washington's hair detail sometimes appears unusually sharp or slightly flattened depending on die life and striking sequence, and the reverse eagle design can reveal unexpected softness in the wing edges or strong definition in the shield lines, both of which become critical clues when separating standard circulation strikes from pieces that slip through with unusual production characteristics. Even the rim, often overlooked, can appear more rounded or uneven in certain examples, hinting at pressure variation during the minting process. The real excitement begins when anomalies enter the picture, double die obverse effects where letters in Liberty or the date show faint duplication under angled light, off-center strikes that shift Washington's portrait into unusual positioning, clipped planchets that remove sections of the coin's edge, rotated dies where the reverse design fails to align properly with the obverse, and rare strike-through errors where foreign material leaves permanent impressions across the surface. Each one transforming an otherwise standard quarter into something collectors actively hunt because it represents a mistake frozen in metal history. As grading experts evaluate these coins, attention shifts from face value completely into technical precision, where mint state preservation becomes a defining factor, and even minor contact marks can separate an ordinary specimen from a high-end collectible, with MS-64 to MS-66 examples drawing interest when paired with sharp strike quality and strong eye appeal. And error-confirmed pieces gaining even more attention when their authenticity is verified through professional grading services that can distinguish true mint errors from post-mint damage that only imitates rarity. In documented collector markets, 1968 quarters showing smaller but verified errors or strong visual appeal have achieved results in the range of $3,000 to $10,000, while unusual discoveries with clearer anomalies or superior preservation have reached around $18,000, and high-grade certified coins with strong strike quality and minimal flaws have been recorded near $28,000. Especially when demand spikes among collectors focused on registry-quality sets and visually striking examples that stand out under competitive grading standards. As rarity intensifies, strong error combinations or exceptionally preserved specimens with unusual production traits have been associated with approximately $45,000 in select auction settings, while extreme mint state errors displaying multiple striking anomalies or highly unusual die conditions have approached around $65,000. And rare misstrikes with dramatic visual displacement or structural irregularities have reached near $95,000 in documented collector sales, with the most exceptional or one-of-a-kind examples, often tied to unique minting circumstances or extraordinary preservation, being discussed up to $110,000, always dependent on verification, market demand, and authenticated grading rather than guaranteed outcomes. And what makes this coin so compelling is not just its recorded value range, but the possibility that it may still be hiding in plain sight, overlooked in jars, drawers, and inherited collections where time has softened attention but not erased potential, which is why careful examination matters, checking exact weight against standard clad expectations, observing metal tone shifts under different lighting angles, analyzing strike alignment for subtle rotation errors, inspecting rim uniformity for irregular expansion or weakness, and using magnification to detect letter doubling that only reveals itself under precision focus, always followed by professional authentication rather than assumption, because the difference between ordinary change and a life-changing discovery often comes down to a single overlooked detail that most people never think to question. Last coin. 1973 United States Washington quarter appears at first like nothing more than another everyday coin passing through countless hands, its familiar Washington portrait blending seamlessly into circulation. Yet this particular year carries a subtle tension in its creation that most people never notice. Because it was struck during a period when the U.S. Mint was refining high-speed production efficiency while still dealing with unpredictable die wear patterns that occasionally left behind small but meaningful irregularities hidden in plain sight. The coin's surface reflects that typical mid-70s clad finish, but under angled light, it can reveal unexpected differences in texture that hint at deeper stories locked into its metal. By 1973, the Washington quarter design had already been in circulation for decades, yet the minting process itself was constantly evolving, and Philadelphia and Denver facilities were operating at full industrial intensity, producing massive quantities while trying to maintain uniform quality, which ironically created the perfect environment for rare mistakes to slip through unnoticed, especially in the form of subtle die deterioration, uneven planchet preparation, and occasional misalignment during high-volume striking cycles that were never intended to produce collectible anomalies. Visually, the 1973 quarter presents a sharp, but sometimes deceptive clarity, where Washington's profile may appear fully defined in some strikes and slightly softened in others, particularly around the cheekbone and hair curls, while the reverse eagle design can show variation in feather depth and shield sharpness, depending on how fresh or worn the die was at the moment of striking. And even the rim can reveal slight inconsistencies in thickness that become important clues for collectors who know how to read a coin beyond its surface appearance. This is where the coin transforms from ordinary to intriguing, because within 1973 production you can find double die varieties where lettering in Liberty or In God We Trust shows faint duplication under magnification, off-center strikes that push Washington's face slightly out of frame, rotated die errors where the reverse design appears misaligned when flipped, broad strike examples that lose the defined rim structure entirely, clipped planchets that remove a segment of the edge, and rare strike-through errors where foreign material leaves unusual impressions frozen into the coin's surface during the moment of impact. When examined by grading professionals, these coins are no longer judged by face value, but by precision metrics such as strike integrity, surface preservation, luster continuity, and microscopic die behavior, with mint-state examples in MS-65 and above becoming highly desirable when combined with strong visual appeal, and error-confirmed specimens gaining additional attention due to their rarity and the difficulty of proving authenticity without certified evaluation, especially when distinguishing true mint mistakes from post-mint damage requires expert-level inspection. In documented collector markets, minor but verified errors or visually appealing 1973 Washington quarters have achieved approximately $7,500 to $18,000, depending on condition and rarity of the anomaly, while unusual misstrikes or more pronounced mint errors have reached around $25,000 in competitive auction settings. And high-grade coins with exceptional preservation and strong strike definition have been recorded near $40. When demand rises among collectors building elite registry sets focused on eye appeal and condition rarity. As rarity intensifies further, strong mint-state error coins showing multiple anomalies or unusually preserved surfaces have been associated with around $55,000 in documented private or auction results, while rare misstrikes with dramatic displacement or striking distortion have approached approximately $80,000, and extraordinary coins with unique minting characteristics and verified rarity factors have reached near $120,000. With extreme or one-of-a-kind examples, often tied to exceptional provenance, flawless preservation, and dramatic minting mistakes, being recorded up to $150,000, always depending on authentication, verified auction history, and collector demand rather than guaranteed valuation. And what makes the 1973 Washington quarter so compelling is not just its potential market range, but the reality that it may still be hiding unnoticed in circulation, forgotten collections, or old storage boxes where no one thought to look closely, which is why careful examination matters, checking exact weight against clad standards, observing metal tone differences under shifting light, inspecting strike alignment for subtle rotation or displacement, examining rim structure for irregular expansion or weakness, and using magnification to detect faint letter doubling, always followed by professional authentication instead of assumption, because the difference between an ordinary coin and a life-changing discovery often comes down to a detail so small it is almost invisible until it suddenly isn't. And if you enjoyed uncovering this hidden history, make sure to subscribe. Because what comes next reveals another coin that looks completely normal until the moment it doesn't. And that is where the real surprises of this series truly begin, and this is the end of the video.